Ladies and gentlemen, welcome once again to the Packernet podcast. I am your host and resident fanalist, as always, Ryan Schlip. Check us out online, packernet.com. Find me on Twitter, pack_data. All right, so today we're going to talk about the official schedule release that took place. Today was an interesting day. I got to set out my little automated watcher thing. That was kind of fun. So I appreciate anybody that went and checked that out. But the schedule is pretty solid. I'm going to be partially digesting it as we go through it together. I did my first once through, and then I've been spending the last probably 30 minutes ranking the schedule release videos. I usually don't care enough, but I was like, you know what? Let's just do it. I don't know if I'm going to finish. I got through 16 and I got the Buccaneers up here. Let me just say this in summary. Number one, Packer fans love, generally speaking, Green Bay Packers schedule release videos. I generally hate them. There is a certain style that the Packers seem to lean into, and I don't know if it's maybe Packer fans just find them endearing more so than I do, or if Packer fans are just being kind or what. I will also say that part of their style is probably something to do with being low budget. This was probably some of the more higher budget stuff with their claymation video that they did that I've seen, but they tend to lean into a sort of, community, let's get the players, and they reach out to Clay Matthews, and they got Leroy Butler, and they even had Grossi do a cameo. And so they do all that stuff. I have said repeatedly they need to stop doing that because the acting is horrific, but I don't think Packer fans care all that much, and so they're nailing it on that front. I will also say that if I removed all the teams that are basically cheating, that is to say they have massive budgets and they're going out and paying for Bert Kreischer or paying for basically a Simpsons intro or then there's like 5 teams left and the Packers are one of the top ones, hands down, if you leveled out the budgets. With that said, I am through 16 and the Packers are not top 10 in the 16. It's hard to say because I want to give them credit over a lot of these other ones. Because I think, they did work harder and they put a lot more thought into it. They put a lot more energy and effort into it than some of these other teams who just kind of, phoned it in with, again, just swiping the credit card on stuff. But I find myself just uncomfortable watching the Packers one every year where I'm just like, this is so cringy. It's like if a little kid's cartoon mixed with bad acting. Come on, team, let's go beat the bad guys. Yes, Jim, let's go do it. Yeah, but that's like Josh Jacobs' voice, so it's great. All right, cool. Well, if that's the case, then I gotta bump up the Jaguars, which will have absolutely the lowest. I don't care. Matter of fact, I'm just gonna drag them to 32 right now because their schedule release was just I had to watch their freaking quarterback get a haircut as they just went through and said, here are the things. Also, the other thing the Packers didn't do very well, that is like the best way to do it is to talk trash as you go through the schedule. They did this whole little skit that really didn't serve any purpose whatsoever in terms of the schedule. It was just a skit. And then they just said, here's the schedule. You know what I mean? Like, what is that? Oof, Lions are bad. Bucks are bad. All right, I think I'm done. I do want to see the Minnesota Vikings one, but after that, I've had enough. I think the thing that I dislike maybe the most about it, and I think the Packers do have this problem as well, is sort of the try-hardiness, You can feel somebody not funny trying really hard to be funny. I don't know. Some of them were like the Chiefs one, that was legitimately, that made me laugh. Anywho, enough of that nonsense. Let's get into the schedule. So it's hard to know exactly where to start because there's so many little nuggets that have come out. We might as well start with my conspiracy theory, which did not come to fruition. If anything, it's the exact opposite. My conspiracy theory, if you didn't know, is that the NFL is going to want the Bears to be a thing. They're going to want the Bears to win the division, blah-de-blah-de-blah-de-blah. In order for that to kind of come to fruition, if they were to put their finger on the scale of the old schedule, I think the most likely thing is you put the Packers week 1. It's a great game nonetheless. I think most people thought that was going to happen anyways. I mean, it's a rematch and all that, but also it's an opportunity to get Micah. You know, you're not going to get 2 games without Micah, pending a second injury. So you got to get in the first 4-ish weeks. We don't know the exact date, but that seems to be the timeline everyone's using is 4 weeks. The Bears did not get a game in those first 4 weeks. Not week 1, 2, 3, or 4. In fact, neither did the Lions, the only team that the NFL decided to put, the only NFC North team they decided to put in those first 4 weeks is a week 1 matchup with the Minnesota Vikings, which, I don't want to assume that that's an automatic win. We never know what the Vikings are going to be from year to year. Every time we think they're going to be great, they're terrible. Every time we think they're going to be terrible, they're great. So I'm hesitant to say they're going to be bad. But I think the assumption is that this is the weakest team in the NFC North, and that's our matchup. Beyond that, if you were to kind of try to figure out where the NFL is leaning, there's a couple other things you can do. One thing that I've noticed is they not only want the week 1 game to look good, but they seem to be very interested in making the week 18 game a good game. And so they want the division, in this case the NFC North, to come down to the 2 teams battling it out head to head. Now, through process of elimination, we can kind of determine that the Vikings, let's say, are last. And so the team that gets paired with the Vikings is the team that they think is going to be third, which leaves the other 2 teams to be the top 2 teams. Well, Minnesota is playing Chicago, which honestly is not all that shocking because the bookmakers do seem to have the Minnesota Vikings as the fourth best odds to win the NFC North, Chicago with the 3rd best odds, Green Bay with the 2nd best odds, and Detroit with the number 1 odds. In fact, it's essentially Detroit and Green Bay, and then a gap, and then Chicago and Minnesota, which I love, and I don't want to spend too much time on it today because it's a great conversation piece for another day, but it very much leans into the idea that, number 1, Chicago was a fluke, and number 2, Detroit and Green Bay were kind of a fluke with all the injuries. And Detroit's been that way for 2 years, but it still has been a thing. They've been dealing with injuries. Not as much as 2 years ago, but still a little bit, and I think they played down a little bit or whatever. So I don't even mind that they're number 1. Not saying that I agree, but I fine, it's whatever. Over at Kalshi, Detroit is 33%, Green Bay at 30%. Very, very close. Then a drop-off to 22% for Chicago and 20% for Minnesota. Well aware it doesn't equal 100, it doesn't have to, don't worry about it. And so we'll say odds makers and the Vegas at large seems to have Green Bay and Detroit as the top 2 teams in the division, and the NFL doesn't seem to necessarily disagree. And if they don't disagree, it would make sense that they don't want to put down the Packers week 1 to give this team that is an overrated bust like Chicago, as much as the NFL might love for Chicago and Caleb to be a thing. If he's not, he's not. So why try to push a thing that isn't? The other thing to look at, so Minnesota at the bottom, presumably, Chicago 3rd, and then Green Bay and Detroit are up there for number. I don't, who's number 1, who's number 2. I don't know, and the NFL obviously doesn't know. But if we were to kind of say, well, how could we do a tiebreaker to determine which one is who the NFL determines as the top team in the NFL or NFC North? There is one other test we could apply here, and it's not a perfect test, but it's an interesting one, and that is how many primetime games the NFL gives each team. Now, it's not a direct correlation. There's some weirdness in here, especially if you look at the NFC North and who has more than who. But If you look at who has the most, it's the Rams. Probably the best team in football. I know Seattle won the Super Bowl. I get that, but I don't care so much. If you look at who has 0, it's the Jets, the Cardinals, the Titans, Miami, and Las Vegas. So it's clearly intentional. So after the Rams, who have 7, there are 4 teams that have 6. And it's Green Bay, Kansas City, Buffalo, and Seattle. That is the next tier. So it makes me happy that at the end of the day, regardless of what the NFL may prefer, and let's be honest, I think the NFL prefers winners, but the NFL seems to be paving the way for a great. They're betting their money on Green Bay having a great season. They essentially gave the Packers, I don't want to say cake because there's no such thing, but if you had to handpick what you thought might be the easiest 4-game stretch, it's at least relatively close prior to Micah coming back. Then you give them a bunch of primetime games followed by a showdown with Detroit to end the season. Never know how things are going to go, but the NFL has kind of tipped their hand, in my opinion. All right, why don't we take a break? When we come back, we'll start going week by week through this schedule. We will be right back. All right, a couple notes just before we get into the week-to-week that I was able to dig up. Number 1, again, 6 primetime games, tied for second most, blah, blah, blah. 5 of the 9 Packers home games are primetime games. The other way to say that is 5 of the 6 primetime games are at home for the Packers. Again, if we're going to twist this as some kind of a narrative in terms of what the NFL is trying to get people to see, sounds like they're trying to set us up to be seen nationally as people that win football games. They get the first ever Thanksgiving Eve game, which we had already talked about. They get the Chicago Day game against the Chicago Bears. This is also on Netflix, so 2 Netflix games. So that's 6 primetime games, 5 of 9, more than half of our home games are on primetime. Not only do we get Thanksgiving, but we get the first ever. It seems like it's a lesser thing because it's not actually on the day, it's the day before, but really that means we get the entire day to ourselves. It's basically like a Monday night football game. And who gets the first ever Thanksgiving Eve game? Oh, I know, let's give it to the Packers. And the fact that they matched us up with the Rams kind of goes to show that this is a title fight and not some throwaway, whatever game. Then we get a Christmas Day game and another Netflix game. So in total, there's 6 primetime games, which are 1 Wednesday night against the Rams, 2 Thursday night, 2 Sunday night, and 1 Monday night. This is also a year where we rotate with extra home games. We have 9 home games and 8 road games. So that works to our benefit. Our home opener, which again we'll get to, but our home opener is a primetime game. Week 3 against the Atlanta Falcons is going to be a Thursday night football game. The late season push. So I mentioned that we get a relatively easier schedule early on in terms of the competition. Does that mean the final games are going to be tough? Depends what you mean by tough. The NFL was so kind as to gracious with 4 of our 5 final games being at Lambeau Field. And then there is a very odd stretch from November 9th to December 5th, which is about a month. There will be just 2 games in that span. So not only is there a bye, there's borderline a double bye built in, just the way the schedule is kind of laid out. Now, the one negative to all the primetime is that for those of you that are fans of the noon home games, only 2 the entire year, because most of our home games got flexed out to primetime. But all right, number 1, week 1, the Green Bay Packers will face off against the Minnesota Vikings. It's not a primetime game, but it is on the road at 3:25 Central. This is a CBS game. Week 1, Packers-Vikings, not massively common. I think only 8 all-time. The last time we were week 1 against the Vikings was back in 2022. Week 1 record against the Vikings is dead even at 4-4. All-time series with the Vikings is 67, 61, and 3, so actually relatively close, a little closer than you'd like it to be, especially if we end up losing this game. The last two matchups were 2020 and 2022, both of which were at US Bank Stadium. Our last game against Minnesota was the final matchup last season, and as you might recall, we ended up sitting our starters and losing that game 16-3. So it is in some ways kind of a revenge game, I guess you can say. I doubt many Vikings fans are doing what Bears fans did and are bragging about it. I haven't heard it, at least. And honestly, for the Vikings, I mean, this might be somewhat of a best-case scenario. I mean, it works for us as well. If we're going to play a division rival, we'd like it to be the Vikings. The Vikings also, if they had to pick, at home against the Packers is probably not a terrible pick. You get the Packers in that 4-week window. You're at home. And week one with Kyler Murray, presumably, as your quarterback, is the 1 week where you can really unveil this offense that nobody's seen before. Everybody has seen a KOC, Kevin O'Connell offense, and everybody has seen a Kyler Murray quarterback. But what exactly does that combination look like? Nobody really knows. Now, to be fair, we have the exact same thing on the defensive side, so it's going to be a surprise for both. But again, if you're the Vikings, you probably would take that. Then week 2, the Green Bay Packers are at the Jets, so 2 road games, but the benefit here to us is the fact that Minnesota is just a hop, skip, and a jump down the street. This is not some massive thing. So they're able to do that, get home, get in their beds, get the entire week ready to rock and roll, practice at home before their official on-the-road game against the Jets. Could be a lot worse. This is going to be the Packers' first noon game. It is not the Jets' home opener. This is their second home game in a row. Obviously, a relatively uncommon opponent. Packers are 9-5 against the Jets, 5 of their last 8 meetings. But the Jets did win the most recent matchup. That was October 16th, 2022, 27-10 Jets. Last time we played the Jets out on their turf was 2018. Packers won 44-38. The Jets are... I hate to even say anything because this is exactly the game that you're supposed to win, but it's just the one that you just bite your tongue if you're a Packers fan. But let's just say that this is a relatively newish team with Aaron Glenn going into just year 2. They traded for Geno Smith from the Raiders, so Geno is going to be their quarterback. They did also draft Cade Klubnik, so if that ends up being a thing, but I doubt it. Got a few other additions over there, including Minka Fitzpatrick and some other big ones, as well as former Packer Kingsley and Igbare, so it'll be a reunion of sorts there. I mean, look, it should be a win. There's really no excuse for it to not be a win, but those underdog quarterbacks with actual weapons and a defensive-minded head coach, it just rings scary in my mind. Still got Breece Hall. Still got Garrett Wilson. Can the Packers stop the run? Do we have any corners that can play football? Then we move on to week 3, the Green Bay Packers home opener against the Atlanta Falcons. This is going to be, as I said, a Thursday night football game. It's going to be on Prime Video. This is a little bit tough. You've got road game, then short week. Again, there's positives and negatives. I mean, we caught a break with some of the teams that we're facing. It's going to be somewhat brutal, though. It's kind of the opposite on the end of this, where you might face some tougher teams, but hey, you got a home stretch. You're just going to have to suck it up. You know what I mean? You can't get everything that you want. So the contrast to the supposedly or sort of light schedule here is the relatively tricky logistical issues. The Falcons are under new regime, Kevin Stefanski. They've got the Bears guy, Ian Cunningham. I think he was with the Bears. It's another team that, you know, kind of, if you were to just give them an overall grade, not the toughest team in football, but, you know, they've got weapons. They got Drake London. They got Kyle Pitts. They got Bijan Robinson. They went real heavy in the draft on, you know, secondary, round 2, Avion Terrell. So this should be big advantage Packers. It's at home, primetime game, ready to rock and roll against the Falcons, who just don't really have... shouldn't have the horsepower to be able to overcome the Packers. Then, week 4, the Green Bay Packers will face the Tampa Bay Buccaneers at Tampa Bay. So this is on the so there's definitely a positive and negative spin to this, because you can look at 3 road games and say that's tough. On the flip side, the way it's laid out does kind of soften the blow a little bit. Again, Minnesota is right down the street. Then you got Jets, short week. That's pretty tough, as in Jets followed by short week. However, it is at home, which is nice. Then you're on the road again. However, you were just at home, and it's an extended week. So again, you can look at it and say 3 road games to start the season is freaking brutal. And yeah, it's not great, but again, manageable. And I appreciate that. I also, we're going to have to hear this I shouldn't say nonsense, but this incessant narrative that I just don't care for, which is the Packers can't play in Florida in hot weather. Every year we have to hear this. I don't even know the last time we lost a warm weather game. We didn't face anybody outdoors in the hot weather, but we faced Arizona and beat them last year. And then 2 years ago we faced the Jaguars, and oh boy, we can't beat the Jaguars. Blah 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 blah. We beat the Jaguars, so it was mid-October as opposed to late September, but the narrative was still going. Oh, it's going to be hot. We can't play there. That was the week after we played the Texans and beat the Texans. The week before that, we played Arizona, beat Arizona. The week before that, we played the Rams, beat the Rams. These are all warm to hot weather teams. Again, to some of them indoors, some of them not. But still, we've won all of those games. But I guarantee you, we're going to have to hear, oh boy, here we go, Packers in Florida. They just can't seem to win those games, I tell you. Someone ironically, the last time we played them, we did lose to them, but that was in Lambeau. The last time we played them in Tampa, the Packers won. So that was back in 2022, a low-scoring thriller. Packers won 14-12. And this honestly might be the first game that is pretty scary. I mean, I legitimately think Baker's a good quarterback. They don't have Mike Evans anymore, so that's a big deal. It's not the same powerhouse team that has all these elite wide receivers. You know, what was it? I don't know, 3-4 years ago, they had like 3 really good wide receivers. But they still have Chris Godwin, who is a good wide receiver. Again, scrappy quarterback. Definitely not one I would completely sleep on, although the Packers should be favorites in that game, I would guess, pending, how they've done up to this point. And then we get to week 5, and I don't even know if I necessarily directly mentioned this. I said that the Bears didn't get a game in the first 4 weeks. Hilariously, again, we don't know definitively. Micah might not be back, but it is a funny little signal that he's expected to be out the first 4 weeks, and his what everybody thinks is going to be his first game back, the schedule makers are like, oh, I know, Bears. I have a thought. So they want that first Bears revenge game to be week 5, the first week that Micah comes back. Again, it feels like I got it exactly backwards as far as who the NFL is rooting for in that rivalry. But this is going to be a Sunday game, a 3:25 game. It is going to be at Lambeau Field. Another signal, it's good. There's going to be that pop. Micah comes in, the crowd goes wild. If they thought this was Micah's first game back, would they do anything else? Why would they have us on the road? They wouldn't. And you can't tell me this isn't, to some degree, intentional. I know a lot of the schedule making is AI stuff, but there's going to be some human intervention there. We're also going to have the first quarter of the season down, so everybody's cards are pretty much going to be on the table. I can't imagine there's going to be a ton of holding back. You're not going to hold back for 4 weeks just because you got the Bears coming up or whatever. That's not going to happen. Same with the Bears and the Packers. They're whatever tweaks that they've made, whatever kind of things that they're trying to do between Ben Johnson year 2 with Caleb or whatever, that's pretty well going to be on the table at this point. Now, the Bears also have, I don't want to say a cake schedule, but Carolina, then Minnesota. They are on the road against Carolina. That's a game that the Bears should be able to win, I would think, although it would be great because there is that sort of contrast to the 2 quarterbacks. They could have taken them, blah, blah, blah. If they, I'm just saying. Then they get Minnesota at home. That's another game that theoretically should be a win. Then they get the Philadelphia Eagles at home, and I don't know what to make of Philadelphia, but Philadelphia should win that game. After that, they're at home for their 3rd straight home game but this one is against the Jets. So there's a very good chance that you've got, let's just say, 2 3-1 teams, which sets up for a really good matchup. But you've got the 3-1 Bears and the 3-1 Packers in Green Bay. Micah's first game back. I mean, this is setting up to be a massive showdown. Then we got week 6. This is going to be against the Dallas Cowboys. Just in case Micah isn't back against the Bears, we got the next best thing, which is him back against the Cowboys. And again, in Green Bay. So solid little buffer here. Either way, we get the crowd pop. Micah revenge game, part 2, blah, blah, blah. But this is actually a Sunday night game, so it is going to be a nationally televised game at Lambeau Field. The Cowboys finished 7-9-1 last year. They had a pretty disappointing season. Hopefully that continues. But the Cowboys are kind of like the Eagles, kind of like a couple other teams where they're very weird. You just don't know from year to year what you're going to get. And if their quarterback is healthy, I think they got a good chance of being a pretty solid team because Dak is pretty talented. But Cowboys have a new defensive coordinator with Christian Parker. We got Rashawn Gary now over there in Dallas, so that'll be a fun little mishmash with the swapping of the edge rushers. They've got CeeDee Lamb and George Pickens at wide receiver, which is one of the better wide receiver duos in the NFL. So definitely not a game to be slept on with that quarterback wide receiver combo. All right, why don't we take our final break and then we'll just rip through the last of these games here. We'll be right back. All right, next up, we have the Detroit Lions. So this is a fun stretch, assuming we're not getting our teeth kicked in during this stretch. The schedule makers, in my opinion, have done everything they can to really help us out. On the road, early, but against very winnable competition. Then you've got, I don't want to say must-win games, but big games against Chicago and Dallas, and you serve them up to the Packers on a silver platter at home, including a primetime game against Dallas with Micah Parsons coming back. This is the ultimate catapult, right? You get some home stretches, you got Micah back, you hopefully had a winning record going in, and now you just pummeled these two teams. Ideally, you're sitting at, 6-1 at this point, having defeated some pretty good teams. And then this is the crescendo into what is assumed to be the top or second best team in the NFC North, which is Detroit. Not necessarily based on record, just based on talent, power rankings, all that kind of stuff. So this should be, ideally, the first clash of the Titans of the NFC North. It's a 3:25 game against Detroit in Ford Field on the road. This is our third NFC North meetup already through 7 weeks, and our second NFC North road game, including Minnesota. The Lions also are in a really weird spot because I think they have a really good chance of having a great year and rebounding and all that kind of stuff. But if they have a bad year, Dan Campbell people are going to start looking at him sideways going, okay, it looks like Ben Johnson officially was the power behind the throne. Maybe we need to look in a new direction. Also, their GM, who got off to a really hot start, has been kind of dog crap the last couple of years. So if this draft class and the last couple draft classes and this team in general don't really perform, this is not going to look very good. And the being unable to win in the division also is a big deal. So I don't know what their record is up to this point. But Dan Campbell has to win these games. Losing to the Packers at home is not something this guy can allow to happen. So this is going to be every fourth down Dan Campbell jacked up on cocaine game. Week 8, Carolina Panthers. This is another Thursday night game, October 29th, at Lambeau Field. So short week after Detroit is tough. You know, you assume Detroit is, first of all, you had to travel. Second of all, probably going to be a very physical game, and you don't have a lot of time to recover. Good news is you are at home, which is nice, but that's something obviously to keep an eye on. Panthers, again, like I said with the Bears, not expected to be a big powerhouse team, but you never know. The quarterback is a kind of up and down deal. I shouldn't even say up and down. He's definitely better than what he appeared to be when he first came into the NFL. and is now appearing to be potentially an actual NFL caliber quarterback. They did win the NFC South this past year, and they spent pretty big in free agency. They went out and spent $120 million on Jalen Phillips off the edge, and then got Devin Lloyd at linebacker, 3 years, $42 million. So they're making a legitimate push here to try to be an actual contender. Then we got Week 9 at Gillette Stadium, Foxborough, Massachusetts, the New England Patriots. All the jokes will be made, I'm sure. This is a 3:25 game. It is going to be commentated by Tom Brady. So that should be a fun and interesting note. We'll see if he ends up being biased or what the end result is. Patriots are looking at Drake May going into year 3. May is interesting because he is one of the wonder children of this young quarterback class, Bo Nix included, that are really impressive, but I think maybe a little bit overhyped. We'll see how this year goes if they continue to take jumps and become genuine premier, I don't want to say top 5 because it's going to be hard to crack that, but in that conversation. Also, reunion with Mr. Romeo Doubs. So should be a pretty fun matchup. Definitely going to be a high-stakes matchup despite being an AFC team because the Patriots most likely are going to be a very good team this year, and so they're going to have a very good record, and so this is going to be a Clash of the Titans type of game, hopefully, assuming that we do have a good record. But a lot of heavy-hitting games in this stretch here. Then Week 10, we get the Minnesota Vikings again. And this is nice because it is a noon game, it's at home, and it precedes a bye week. Now, there's going to be the concerns of, are they going to overlook the Minnesota Vikings and look ahead to the bye week or all that kind of stuff? I don't know. And again, I don't know if the Vikings are good or not. I'm hoping that they're bad, but you hope that this is kind of a cool down period. You take the W, you've taken your lumps through that pretty rough stretch, you get the W, you get your bye week to kind of, collect yourself, because after that is probably going to be the toughest game of the year, and that's going to be the LA Rams in that, Wednesday game prior to Thanksgiving. Not a lot else to say about it. The Rams are a tough team. I will say there's a chance. There's a chance for any team, but there is a chance that the Rams are one of the teams that will regress this upcoming year. You look at the talent that they have is definitely on the older side. Not all of it, but a lot of it. A lot of important talent. And also, we've been seeing some really, really top end from some of these guys. Stafford is playing at like the best he's ever played in his career, and I don't know that keeps up. The Week 13 matchup is against the Saints. This is a noon game in New Orleans. Saints have a new head coach in Kellen Moore. It's his first full year after taking over halfway through last year. I've mentioned this before, but I'm slightly intrigued by Tyler Shaw, who is a second-round pick. He actually graded out pretty well in the limited amount of time that we got to see him. They added Jordan Tyson in the first round, as well as Bryce Lance to be that speed threat guy. He was a fourth-round pick, so you got those two guys wrapped around Chris Olave. They still have Alvin Kamara hanging on, but brought in Travis Etienne to be more the down-to-down banger. Defense is probably going to be the biggest weakness, but the biggest question for me is Tyler Shaw, and do they have anything in him or not? Week 14 is Packers versus Bills. This is at Lambeau Field. This is going to be, again, a primetime game. This is Sunday at 7:20 p.m., so Sunday night game. It's another massive AFC clash. Patriots, Buffalo, coming off recently the Rams. Bills are intriguing for their own way. They're another team that is just kind of always lingering, but they never can quite get over the hump. Let me check real quick. Yeah, so I think this might be their first year without sort of a premier wide receiver. Josh Allen went the first couple of years without one. They went out and got Stephon Diggs, and that was when he exploded. Now, I'm not saying he's going to regress back to being a crap quarterback. I think he's turned that corner. But they've continually fed him with talented quarterbacks wide receivers. Right now, they added DJ Moore. So that's what they've got, which is a pretty rough situation. They still have James Cook, Dawson Knox, and Dalton Kincaid at tight end. But the wide receiver situation is pretty bleak. They added Skylar Bell in the 4th round, but otherwise nothing really doing there. So I don't know exactly how much of a powerhouse team this is going to be, especially with the emergence once again of the Patriots and maybe some other teams that are starting to step up. I'm not sure if Buffalo doesn't slip a little bit. That being said, this is still going to be a tough matchup. Then week 15, we get a very fun game, and that is the Miami Dolphins. This is going to be another home game. This is a noon game, and we get the Halfley crew and Malik Willis to come back to Lambeau Field. Now, I'm not necessarily looking forward to that. Halfley is a talented defensive mind. How good of a head coach, I don't know, but a talented defensive mind. And Malik is a scary quarterback. I mean, I want to wish him the best, but if he's as good as he looked for the Green Bay Packers, I mean, he was arguably, again, just looking at his stats and his PFF grades and all that, I don't know that he wasn't the best quarterback in football last year. That's pretty much what he's been every time he stepped foot on the field for the Green Bay Packers. So it's not a super small sample size when you look at, what is it, like 5 different games or something? But we'll see. I'm not looking forward to playing Malik. I'll put it that way. I'm hoping this is not a super tough matchup. The Dolphins are not really seen as a contender yet. They're kind of a building team. But I don't know that they're not going to be a little bit scary. But there's so many different variables here. I mean, they're in kind of a rebuild phase. They lost a lot of people. They added some people. There's a lot of questions that need to be answered for Miami before we can really determine anything. But either way, it's a fun matchup to get Lambeau South to come up north for us. Week 16 is going to be at Chicago. Not a whole lot else to add here, but pretty likely that this has some big implications. As much as I'm hoping that the Packers have a bit of a lead, if you think about it, even if we have a 2-game lead on Chicago, losing to Chicago here is massive. And the idea that we have like a 4-game lead and this isn't going to matter is very unlikely, I would say, especially with some of the really tough matchups we've had. Taking that kind of a lead, unless the Chicago Bears completely implode, is unlikely. So this game in Chicago, on Christmas, mind you, is going to be massive. My wife, by the way, not going to be very happy to learn that Christmas Day, not only is it Christmas Day, but it's not like Christmas night or anything. No, this is at noon. Christmas at noon. Man, there's going to be so many people that are mad about that. Do you know how many fights this is going to cause in households? I mean, my wife gets it, especially considering this is my income. So she's not going to be happy, but it's like, well, whatever. But this is not her idea of how we spend Christmas. And I'm guessing a lot of people are going to agree when, there's probably going to be a lot of husbands pleading with their wives, and then the wives saying, well, I guess you care more about football than your family and about Jesus. Way to go. And that's going to devolve into an argument. Way to go, NFL. Then week 17, the Green Bay Packers are going to be playing at home. Again, big home stretch here, 5 straight games, or is it 6 straight games? Oh, I'm sorry. No, wait. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yeah, 5 games at home in a row. Buffalo, Miami, Chicago, Houston, and then Detroit after this. But Houston is another team where, C.J. Stroud took a step back, so there's questions there. One thing that is not really a big question, anything can get better or worse, but their defense was otherworldly. They have probably the best pass rush duo in football, and they scare the living crap out of everybody. So let's hope we have a healthy offensive line. Let's hope Jordan Morgan and Zach Tom end up being a really top-tier tackle duo, as well as everybody else kind of stepping up a little bit, because we're going to need all hands on deck to beat this this team, this defense. Again, Packers on paper should be a better team than Houston, but you just can't discount a team when they come in and you're saying this is the best defense in football kind of thing. And then finally, final game, which will likely be the show. It feels like every year the final game is a big deal. Last year, obviously, they got to sit their starters, but very, very often the schedule makers do a very good job picking the right teams, and the Packers usually are that right team that are in contention. They haven't come out on top all the time or even very often recently, but they usually are a team that is in contention and needs this final game. And so there's almost, similar to what I said about Chicago, there's almost no chance in the world that this game doesn't matter. Now, the problem is there is a chance that the Packers have the playoffs locked up, and so there may be a decision to be made here. But the fact that it's Detroit, which is why the NFL does this, by the way, to try to encourage you to not sit your starters. And they're also probably figuring that Detroit and Green Bay have the best chance of playing for the division here. More than likely, this game is going to be massive. And look, I hope that it is. I mean, honestly, the best case scenario is that we're so far ahead it just doesn't matter. But that's super unlikely. And again, even if you're up a couple games, I mean, do you want to drop one to Detroit here? And you're probably playing for seeding on top of that. Even if you did have the division locked up, which again would be a heroic feat, given how talented Detroit and Chicago are, to have the division locked up so comfortably after having played the Houston Texans, the Chicago Bears, the Buffalo Bills, the Rams, the Patriots. I mean, that would be remarkable if we were several games ahead and outpacing the entire NFC. Let's assume that's not the case, and so this is going to end up being a really big game. Fortunately, this one is in Lambeau, and again, this 5-game stretch at home, if we can be healthy down this stretch and putting our best foot forward, I mean, can you imagine probably at least a 6-game win streak with the Saints being here? But if you can beat the Saints and then power through with your best football against Buffalo, Miami, Chicago, Houston, and Detroit as a total flip to 2025 where you crashed and burned to be playing your absolute best football, those final 6 games to go on a 6-game streak, even if you lose to the Rams, would be pretty remarkable. And it would be a great way to start off, especially for a team saying, what do we do? Because what can we do differently to actually make an impact in the playoffs? I don't know the answer to that. I feel like we've tried everything, but how about a 6-game win streak? How about that? And we get the number 1 seed. How about that for a goal? See if that does anything for us. All right, I'm going to leave it at that. Again, probably quite a bit of nuggets, and I know there were some news things I didn't touch on. I'll just save those for tomorrow, but the schedule release came out late, and I was kind of poking around waiting for it, so I figure, did this thing break on me? Last second, this thing's giving me problems. I got to get out of here. Anyways, bye. We'll talk to you later. Have a good one. Bye-bye.